Sometimes when you're cruising, you get to choose where you're looking for a boatyard and what that boatyard actually looks like. But how do you decide where you might want to haul your boat? Hi, I'm Nico Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley podcast. I'm talking a little bit about why we chose the boatyard that we did, where our boats are, for this summer. Today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by MantisMarine.com, maker of the Mantis Anchor, now available in models with and without a roll bar. Proven to set reliably in the most challenging bottoms, the Mantis Anchor digs like no other, making anchoring safer and boating more enjoyable. Mantis Marine brings to market practical, durable, and affordable marine products, including anchoring gear, scuba diving accessories, a rechargeable waterproof headlamp for hands-free lighting, and solar charging navigation light. Visit MantisMarine.com and see for yourself. Well, when you're in a boatyard, probably don't need an anchor, but maybe it's a good time to mark all your chain. In any case, though, how do you choose a boatyard? If you've been following this podcast for a while, you may know that we have two boats and we've gone back and forth in a couple of different boatyards in a couple of different locations. We've been in a yard in Maryland for the last couple of years, and now we've got both boats back in Deltaville. And a few people have asked us how we decided on the yard where we are. Well, they also start by saying, why are you back in Deltaville? And then there are other considerations. So I'll tackle the why Deltaville first. It really comes back to community. And I've talked before on this podcast about the importance of community when you're choosing a boatyard. And this is not the first podcast on choosing a boatyard, but I thought I would add a few more things to the whole conversation for you maybe to consider. But the larger community outside of just the boatyard is also not to be underrated. And this is exactly why we're back in Deltaville. We kept Calypso at Fishing Bay Yacht Club for close to 20 years. We have tons and tons of friends in the town, either on the weekends or they're living there full time. And when we walk the docks at the club, even though we're not members there anymore, it's absolutely like returning home. And so for us, it's the support network that we have in Deltaville. And it's a support network that has been cemented by years of shared dinners, boat work help, and so many countless evenings of laughter and conversation. And we just feel like we can breathe better in this small town. We're definitely small town people. And though Pasadena, Maryland is not considered a large town by large town standards, it's way bigger than our comfort level. Deltaville is hard if you are a transient anchoring out. It's not a town that's easy without a car. Before COVID, they had a shuttle bus running, and that made life a little bit easier, but it's hard if you don't have a car. But we are in a boatyard with our trusty van, which is also our mobile workshop, and it's parked right next to the boats. We also have the support network that if we needed to borrow a car or have somebody help us get to our car, we have that support network. And so figuring out if you are in a position to be able to choose where you want to go for a boatyard, thinking about that larger community sense and what works for you is really important. One of the reasons we went up to Pasadena was that there were some things that we needed to get done up there that were harder to get done in Deltaville. So there are often reasons to be in one place over another. But then once you've decided on where you're going to be, if you have boatyard options, and if you're actively cruising, you might only have one option and hopefully the yard will haul your boat. But what are some considerations for how you choose a certain boatyard? First of all, there are the questions that you can find out by calling or emailing. Like, what size is the travel lift? If you're a catamaran, this is particularly important. How many stands do you use on each boat? If you're going to be hauling out for the winter or a storm season, you want more stands on the boat. What are your rates for haul block launch? Rates for storage. Do you charge for stands? Do you have space for my boat? Do you allow me to do any DIY? Okay, if you don't, or that's not your thing, what services do you provide at what cost? Can I live on the boat while it's on the hard? None of these questions might be important to you as you're listening to this, but there are some questions that you can find out just by calling or emailing a yard. And their responsiveness may give you some indication as to how they might be to work with. The only thing with these kinds of questions is that sometimes you might not get the actual real answer to some of the questions. And though rates are rates and pretty much everyone charges the published rate for hauling or storage, Sometimes showing up in person and being a reasonable human being or bringing your boat somewhere and being a good citizen means some things might be open to you than is actually stated in the paperwork. Sometimes the published rules and rates are there to help the yard kick out an undesirable tenant or just to keep people away. But when you're talking to a yard, present yourself as the good citizen that you mean to be. There are also intangibles about boatyards, and they're harder to answer and more based on your gut. And these, again, may or may not be important to you. How neat and tidy is the yard? How was your interaction with the yard personnel? Where in the yard will your boat be? Can you park your car near your boat? Is there shade during the day? Can you get packages? Is the yard in a good location for storms? Are there sufficient power and water outlets near where your boat will be stored? Are you allowed to access the yard on the weekends or after hours? Sometimes these intangibles are what is going to make or break a yard in your particular estimation. We considered 2 yards in Deltaville. There are lots more options in Deltaville than just 2. Most of them don't even pretend to nominally allow DIY. And for various reasons and prior experience, one of the options that do, we would not even consider. So how did we wind up deciding on Zimmerman's? And the first thing I'm going to start with is going to surprise you. Price. Because at first glance, Zimmerman's is not the least expensive yard around. Not even for DIYers like this. But the other yard that was on our possibility list, there were a lot of extra charges. There was a charge if you wanted to be doing DIY work. There was daily charges if you wanted to be a DIY boater. There were charges for living aboard. There was charging for electricity. If you wanted to have your dinghy off the boat and onto the boat, there was an extra charge for that. It was really, really hard to get a sense of what our true costs might be. But at Zimmerman's, the price you see for storage is the price you pay. All the other stuff is wrapped into it. DIY. While Zimmerman's is not a DIY yard per se, they do allow us to do our own work above the waterline. Basically, they're not very excited about you doing your own bottom prep or bottom painting due to environmental concerns. But since this is not something that we need to do on either boat, that caveat was not a big concern. And I guess I should say that Zimmerman's has a number of different yards across the United States. Not across the United States, but along the East Coast. I think at this point they're up to maybe 5 different yards. The one in Matthews, Virginia was the very first one. This one that they've had in Deltaville open, they've had it open for a number of years at this point. But this ties into the next one, so reputation. We're not planning on hiring any work out, but if we did, Zimmerman's has an incredibly, incredibly solid reputation. Such a solid reputation that I remember years ago when we were talking about changing out the engine on Calypso, which Jeremy wound up doing himself, but the only yard we would possibly have considered it in the entire Chesapeake was Zimmerman's in Matthews. It's had a really good reputation for a really long time. Is it the cheapest place to get work done? No, not by a long shot. Part of their reputation is that they warranty their work. And what I mean by this is we've heard from friends who have had issues, and most people don't have issues, is that the yard remedies their mistakes at no additional charge to the client. And this, we have found, is not standard in the boatyard world. Zimmerman's is very proud to proclaim that they are employee-owned, and in our experience, and this is a little bit one of the intangibles, but this pride translates directly to how they keep the yard. Neat, tidy, picked up. It's so neat and tidy that we like to add to that and help out by, if we see a piece of trash, we make a point of going around our boat, which we do anyway, picking up things at the end of the day. But we would make a point walking back and forth to the head, just picking up any tiny little things that we saw, because there's not a lot of trash at all around the yard. Location, other than in Deltaville, but Deltaville has 2 options for water access in terms of yards and marinas. There's Fishing Bay, which is off of the Piankatank River, with 1 marina and 1 yard. And then there's the Broad Creek side, which is the northern side of Deltaville, off of the Rappahannock River. Many, many, many more options for yards. but it's also a tighter squeeze in terms of tide and shoaling. A lot of boats, not ones like us because we're a little bit shallow, but boats that we know with deeper drafts, they have to time the tide to be able to get into Broad Creek. Fishing Bay is just easier in and out for us, but also for many other people. And then back to some more intangibles. We just got a great feeling and a quick response when we emailed the general manager of Zimmerman's. And that good feeling was cemented when we were talking to Tom, who's the service manager at this specific location where we are in Deltaville. Tom knew what a Bristol channel cutter was. He was happy to listen to what we would need, which is space for both boats to be next to each other and that we needed long-term storage for mischief. We had to leave for college graduation before there was space on the schedule to haul the boat, but he promised to take care of it while we were gone. And when we got back, we saw him, and just to remind you, we've seen him once before. When we got back, we saw him as we were approaching the yard in the car. And he stopped us. He said, "Hey, Nick and Jeremy, welcome back. Did you find mischief?" He didn't need us to reintroduce ourselves. He didn't need us to tell him what we were looking for. He remembered us. He remembered our boat. He remembered that we had been gone and we might be looking to see where the boat was. These are intangibles. Choosing a boatyard is a little bit of a combination of choosing a neighborhood as well as choosing a neighborhood garage. You can do a whole lot of prior research, but eventually it comes down to what feels right for you. And that might change as time goes on. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you when neither one of us is in a boatyard, or if we're in a boatyard, maybe we're just raising a glass to each other and cheering to our incredible good fortune at being able to live such a wonderful lifestyle. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when you share us with your friends, and we love it when you don't forget to subscribe. The Boat Galley podcast is all about making boat life better. That's kind of what the Boat Galley is all about in general, and we sure hope we've done that for you today. Have a great week.